Ladies and gentlemen of the Cartoon Chronicles podcast, I'm your host, Julian. Today I'm joined by living legend, Disney royalty, Mr. Andreas Deja. Andreas, how are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Thanks.
Oh, dude, I can't thank you enough, man. Like I said, when I set out to do this show, obviously I've segmented a lot of the chats I've had between the networks that these cartoons that are behind me, right, that I've put up on this wall, have impacted me so much from Cartoon Network to Nickelodeon to Disney. And as far as Disney goes, there's two folks that I have yet to talk to. I've got to cross one off my list today, and that's Mr. Andreas right here, ladies and gentlemen. And the other one is Eric Goldberg. Man, you guys are two of the most influential artists and two of my favorite artists of all time that come out of Disney. So before we dive into your career, that's a long-winded way of saying it's been a long time coming, Andreas, and I'm very excited. But before we dive a little bit into your career, man, you're working on a book that when I posted your picture saying you were coming on, there was one person in particular, shout out to Donnie because he made this connection happen from the Disney History Channel, that wanted to know all about this book that you're working on for Milk Call. Now, obviously, Milt is a huge inspiration to damn near every artist I've ever had on this podcast. I've heard so many people say he was out of the nine old men, he was the best dressed, he's the best artist out of the entire nine, man. So, what does Milk Call mean to you? How does this book come into your head as something you have to write? How does this whole process work out?
Well, let me go back to Roger Rabbit because it was at the time when we were doing that movie in London, I was working with animation director Richard Williams, and we both thought when we're done with the movie with Roger Rabbit, let's do a book on Milk Call because even at that time it seemed overdue because the man had such an influence on so many people, animators, illustrators, just about everybody. And we did some rough layouts and kind of put some things together early on. But then, as these things go, when the movie was over, I went back to Burbank to start on Little Mermaid. He picked up again his movie, The Thief and the Cobbler, so he got very busy with that. And so the idea to do the Milk Hall book with him kind of fizzled out. It's kind of a shame because he also had deep insight into the not just the man's talent, but into his psyche and who he was and why he became so good, and also knew him personally. And I also knew him personally. I had a chance to visit Milt for I think about 4 or 5 times in the early 80s because I started at Disney in 1980, and I would go up once a year, sometimes twice, and just kind of interact and have lunch with him and his wife, and yeah, I spent like super quality time with him. So yeah, these were all the foundation for these conversations with him, the foundation for the idea for the book. And it took this long for me to pick it up again. I just finished my own film. Some of your audience just might know this. Some people in the audience. I finished my own half hour film, which took me almost 8 years. So now it's time for other projects, and this is on the very top of my list. This Milk Call book. And I had a meeting with somebody from Disney Feature Animation, who's way up there, who I related this idea to. This is just maybe a couple months ago, and I said, I need to do this book because, and but I can't do it the normal way. I can't do it as a standard size because there's so much talent, so much personality, and that he was just so important, not just to the world of Disney, the world of animation, the world of art, that it needs to be an oversized book, almost the size of these Taschen books,
Mhm.
maybe not quite as large, but kind of there. So I got approval that yeah, it should be an oversized book, and that I can get going on this, and so here I am doing research, and my task right now is to not republish what I already posted on my blog over the last decade or so. That wouldn't be fair. I want to find new material. I will have access to the Animation Research Library, and that's a place that houses all the drawings ever made at Disney, including Mill Calls. And I'll be using that as a resource for new images. Unfortunately, the studio, the company, never kept the animation roughs,
Mhm.
the first pass drawings that the animators do. They only kept the cleanups. So too bad. But in Milt's case, what happened in about 50% of the of his scenes were actually cleaned up on the same sheet of paper that he drew these rough uh, drawings on. So instead of taking a new sheet of paper, for which a cleanup artist would do and trace it very cleanly, then that would go to ink and paint. They kept Milt's rough drawing, just put a graphite line on top by a cleanup artist, and then that those drawings would be kept. So you basically have both. You have Milt's drawing and a cleanup line on top, and that's acceptable to me because that still has the vitality of his own concept for a drawing or a character. So I'm going to be leaning heavily on the Animation Research Library at Disney. I still have to go to the Disney archives. They keep paperwork and contracts and all kinds of stuff related to their artists. I want to do a little deep dive on that. And I talked to his daughter, Sybil, and she's very excited about this. She wrote a short but very, very poignant intro to the book,
Yeah.
which I'm happy to share, of course, later. So yeah, this is just a dream come true to finally spend real time on this book.
Oh man, there's so many people, myself included, that are really excited to see you put this one out. Now, what does milk call mean to you?
Just about the ultimate in draftsmanship and animation. I wouldn't say some people say, "Oh, he's the best animator who's ever been." And Milt said in an interview once, when the interviewer brought that up, he said, "Oh, that's nice. I'd like to hear that." And I don't think he is because there were other animators, whether it's Frank and Ollie or uh, Bill Titler or Freddie Moore, that did things that Milt couldn't do.
Mhm.
So I think every animator brings something to their work that is unique and personal. Um, I don't think there is such a thing as one being the best animator in the world. It's just personal taste, I guess.
Yeah.
But he is certainly one of the greatest animators, performers, and then but he is the best draftsman to ever work in the industry because when you really look at his track record, ever since Pinocchio, when he redesigned that puppet that nobody liked at the time because it looked wooden and sterile. It was based on the old book illustrations that you find in the Colati books. Um, it just looked very stiff, and he didn't like it, and he spoke up. And one of the directors said, "Well, then put your pencil where your mouth is." And he said he came up with a test scene, and he treated him like a little kid who happened to have these wooden arms and legs. That was almost minor or secondary, and Walt just loved it. And then, but everybody saw, man, on top of that, he is a designer. He can really draw better than most of us. And so Walt leaned from then on, and this is what Ollie Johnston told me, leaned from then on Milt's draftsmanship for basically all the feature characters. There's the odd one that Milt never touched. I don't think he ever did a drawing of Cruella de Vil. Uh, few others, but really 80, 90% of all the Disney feature characters really have his final approach or
Yes.
his craftsmanship. Yeah.
Now, what do you think, in your personal opinion? Now, obviously, me, I'm just a fan of everything you guys do, but with you being a technician, you being an animator yourself, what was it that made him so special? Was it how he took a concept, how he looked at stuff, just how he broke it down? Like, what made him so special?
Yeah, so let's talk draftsmanship first. It's just superior draftsmanship. There's a sense of, and he didn't even know, he couldn't even explain it because I asked him this a couple of times when I saw him after he had moved to San Francisco. He left the studio in 1976, and I started there in 1980. So during the early 80s, one of those visits, I asked, so how do you put a design together? Because your balance of straight lines and curved lines is so dynamic and perfect. And he said he didn't know what I was talking about. He said, well, you just draw well. I mean, he just could not explain it. It was completely intuitive to him. So he was not a good teacher for that reason. He couldn't explain his technique. Um, he would say things like, he would say, I mean, I would get some words of wisdoms out of him, like studying live action. He said when he was working on the Jungle Book and on the big cats, and on the panther and the tiger, he said, of course, you do some research. he said, we here at Disney, we had a movie called A Tiger Walks from the early 60s. And he had access to a 35 millimeter print of that, plus the outtakes. So there's a tiger doing things, walking, running, jumping. So he would study that frame by frame. Uh, and um, and I said, "How long did you do that for?" Because I was kind of curious. How long does it take Milt Kahl to prep up for animating a big cat? And he said a couple of weeks. So that kind of
Okay.
shocked me because when you look at Shere Khan or Bagheera, there seems to be a lifelong study
Hmm.
of big cats and how to simplify their anatomy and how to make them move in such a smooth way. But in the end, I think Milt had a way of looking at that live action material, these cat movements on film for 2 weeks. He would, I think, look at something and immediately get it and then move on to the next observation. He would file it away immediately. He was just that smart, and then he would know how to apply it. Yeah, genius. And in terms of his animation and his movement, his characters have I mean, always have weight, and that is such a big deal in animation, in CG, in 2D animation, and in stop motion. It doesn't matter. If your character doesn't have any weight, it's probably likely that the audience won't really believe in the character, or less so. So that weight is not just when a character walks and bends the knee according to the weight. It's in everything. It's in fabric. It's in a heavy coat. It's in hair. Everything weighs a certain amount in his animation, and yes, his animation is very fluid. It's probably more dance-like, choreographed than any of the others. Um, there's a melody to it. There's a
Hmm.
rum, rum, bum, bum, bum. There's a theme and a melody to it. It's highly choreographed. Um, I just compare that to another genius, Frank Thomas, who was so famous for internal acting, and he didn't quite do it that way. But his animation is equally wonderful, I think. So that's the interesting thing about Disney animation. Once you do a deep dive into who did what and how they animated it, they all had their own approach. I mean, Ollie had his. Ollie was very intuitive. Frank was analytical like crazy. You look at his papers, his animation paper, and it's all wrinkled from flipping. You can just see the
Hmm.
the wrinkles, and so he messed with it more. And there was somebody like Woody Reitherman who did many versions of the same scene. He would have 6, 7 versions that he would send to camera before he's satisfied. So that they all had their own technique. And I remember Richard Williams telling me, he said, I asked Milt this once. I said, do you work closely with Frank? Because obviously you share characters. You did Tramp, and Lady in the Tramp was basically Milt Kahl and Frank Thomas. And then King Louie in Jungle Book, Milt Kahl, Frank Thomas. And Madam Mim, the same. And I said, and so Dick Williams asked him, so do you know how Frank works versus how you work? And Frank said, and Milt Kahl said, I have no idea how Frank works. I have no idea. It's just fascinating, that you just do your own thing basically within the Disney universe. Of course, it has to fit in terms of entertainment and approach and draftsmanship. But how to get there, everybody has their own approach.
Such a special time within animation history. Now, there's two questions before we move off the Milt talk, and I'm pretty sure Milt will come back up because there is a question towards the end. But where do you think Milt's peak was? Where do you think his greatest character was? Where do you think that he got, like I said, what was his David essentially?
Um, that's an interesting question. Um, I don't think he ever had a peak. I think he was great from the beginning. You look at his stuff in The Ugly Duckling, and he did the duckling being very sad and lonely, and with his big feet, and there was a lot of pathos in that. And that's not the work of a beginner. That's already great.
Yeah.
So it comes to taste too. There are some people who think, oh, before he became graphic, starting with Sleeping Beauty, before that his stuff was more based on Freddie Moore's concept of animation and drawing, and it was easy. His designs were easier to follow. They were easy to draw. This is actually something Frank Thomas would say. Starting with Sleeping Beauty, where everything began being stylized, and Milt never looked back. I mean, he stayed stylized in 101 Dalmatians and Sword in the Stone and Jungle Book. Once he was on that path, he never looked back and did round, sculpted kind of drawings. It was very graphic, very flat, and highly sophisticated. I like both. I like a high point in his earlier career would be he did a sequence in Johnny Appleseed in that short for Melody Time, I think. And there's a song where his angel, Johnny's angel, sings about all the things you can do with apples, apple pie, apple cider, and he sings a song, and Johnny reacts. That is that is like poetry in motion.
Yeah.
It's a short song, but whoever, whoever wants to study animation and yeah, this is with music, of course. It is perfection, and that's in the old style before he became graphic. So that would be a highlight that I would point out. And then, of course, later on, during the '60s, that tiger in the Jungle Book is just insane. It is so reduced to its essence. Because when you look at the anatomy of a tiger, it's complex. You can get lost in all the anatomy and the bones and structure and the fur and all of that, the stripes, and yet he boiled it down to an essence that's abstract, and but not abstract in a way that is less accessible to a general audience. Everybody loves that tiger,
Hmm.
but from an artistic point of view, it's in the stratosphere. So that would be the highlight probably for me when he was doing more graphic work.
Well, you don't know this because this is the first time we've chatted, but Jungle Book is hands down my favorite movie from the Disney. Yeah, it is something. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the songs. I don't know if it's just the animation. It's probably just everything. It's a little bit of everything. That I find myself watching that one so much. There's two in particular that I watch so often. And we have three kids. Two of the littles, we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I'm introducing them to every Disney movie I possibly can, just like I was introduced to every Disney movie when I was coming up. And there is something very special about 101 Dalmatians and Jungle Book. Jungle Book in particular, since we're talking about that, Shere Khan. There is something, and I don't know how to put it into words, but it's like a tiger is a killer, right? You know that it has no problem shredding a human, right? And there is just something so lackadaisical about Shere Khan that he knows and he's confident in what he can do to Mowgli and Baloo and everybody else. And then it's a switch that gets flipped halfway through that movie, and you see what a tiger really is. And it was, like I said, like you said, just pure perfection on the screen. Now, the last question about Milt before we rotate off of Milt for a little while, man. Was he a musician at all? Because I remember you saying, the way he would do it, it just seemed like it was choreographed, very melodic, like everything had its own like soundtrack essentially. Was he a musician?
No, not until late in life, and not even then. He picked up piano lessons in his retirement just to keep
Mhm.
himself busy because he didn't work anymore. So this was up in San Francisco. But during his career, no, he wasn't. I mean, there were other people. Frank played the piano, and Walt Kimmer played the trombone. So there were some that were musically inclined, but Milt wasn't. I mean, no.
Okay, just over the last couple weeks, I've had a bunch of chats on. I've had a few composers on as well, and them being able to be paired with an animator, and then an animator and a musician being able to speak the same language when it comes to music. When you see it on the screen, it's like, oh my God, they speak the same language. They know what one and the other one is doing. Everything is matched perfectly. So it's been something that I've been kicking around. I wonder if people that are a little bit more inclined to music within the animation field, if everything they draw or if everything they're working on kind of has its own soundtrack before a soundtrack is put to it. Weird thing I'm kind of flushing out, man. So as we put Milt away for a little while, I do want to get on to your film that you're working on. So was this the steampunk one? I had a question that had popped up in one of my threads that somebody had said that they had read a few years back that you were working on a steampunk two D animated film. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, it's not. I did a film. It's a story about a little girl raising a tiger cub.
Hmm.
And then as the
Oh,
tiger
Mishka.
grows and they become friends, but there's danger because there are some people who want to kill the tiger, and the girl, of course, wants to save him
Mhm.
and tries to save him. That's sort of the middle part of my story. And yeah, I've been wanting to, of course, still do 2D animation because that's in my DNA. And I thought, okay, in this case, then if the studio stopped doing this type of animation, I don't have to. I still have stuff to say, and so I had some help with this with the screenplay and all that. I just had the basic idea, and we fleshed that out. Yeah, and it ended up being what is it, 28 and a half minutes long film.
When is it going to release, or is it already out there?
It's not already out there. We are actively pursuing a release date before the holidays this
Oh,
year.
okay, cool. So more to come, ladies and gentlemen. So stay tuned. Now, when I knew you were going to come on, there is, like I said, you have captivated me with your artwork since I was a little guy. I know you said before we hit record that kind of dates you, makes you made you feel a little old, man. But I was born in '89. What happens in '89? Little Mermaid, right? Being a redheaded guy myself, I don't know if it was the colors, but when I was a baby, whenever babies, go through the little tantrum stages and they can't sit right, my mom would park me in my little swing, and she would pop in the VHS of the Little Mermaid, and like that the cries would stop, the yelling, the tantrums would stop, and I would be captivated. And for the longest time, I never understood why I always got Little Mermaid gifts for my birthday or for Christmas when I was younger until my mom and my sister explained it to me. Now, I usually save the fans' questions for the end, but it's particular to where we're kicking off with the Disney Renaissance, right? Because there was a lot of things that happened in the animation industry from the early to mid 80s. A lot of people look at that as like not a great time for animation. But towards the end of the 80s and early into the 90s, there was a huge boom started essentially by Disney that filtered into things like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and other studios. Now, with that question in particular, it's coming from Bryce from our Patreon channel, and he said, "I'm curious about the atmosphere within the animation department right before the Disney Renaissance explosion. After the Black Cauldron failed to reach its desired marks, what was the turning point in both morale and new direction that was able to kickstart a run of such incredibly acclaimed classics, starting with The Little Mermaid?" So. Take us back to that era. It's Little Mermaids. You guys are working on that one. What's it like, morale wise? What's it like, temperament? Like, what is it like during that era?
Well, I spent 4 years working on the Black Cauldron, and
Mhm.
when that movie didn't deliver box office wise, it was not a shock, but it was disappointing. And we knew that the studio would keep an eye on the box office, and then on top of that, we had a management change. So we had new management coming in, Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, and they came just toward the end of the Black Cauldron. It hadn't been released yet, so I remember that Jeffrey was trying to re-edit it because he thought it was too gruesome, and so some of the stuff was cut out before it went out. It went out, it flopped, and it didn't look so good because they didn't really care for animation that much. This was Eisner and Katzenberg, and they were talking about closing it down. And there was talk like we have enough classics that we can bring back every few years, and so each year we have a classic, and so we don't really need new ones. And that's not the first time that those conversations were had. They were also being had after Sleeping Beauty in 1960, 1959, when that movie flopped with a huge budget. So over the years, there were these points in time where the money wasn't coming in, so this is just getting too expensive. So that also happened after the Black Cauldron, and I thought, well, I had a nice time. I would need to go back to Germany, I guess, and find a job back to Germany where I came from, and maybe find a job there. But then Roy Disney was still around, and
Yeah.
he made the big difference. You probably heard the story before, but he basically took Eisner and Katzenberg aside and said, "Look, you might not see this right now, but animation is really the heart and soul of the company because it feeds the theme parks and the merchandise and television and all other aspects of the company, but it is the heart and soul, and I want to keep doing it, but do it really, really well. And and then at that time, Jeffrey Katzenberg, he was sort of going to be the one to work closely with us more than Eisner, because Eisner oversaw more things within the company. And Jeffrey Katzenberg he had kids at the time that were very young, twins, a boy and a girl. And he took every day or every other day, he took a 16 millimeter version of from Snow White, started with Snow White, Pinocchio, Dumbo, Fantasia, Bambi, and all that. So the order they were made, took that 16 millimeter print home and watched it with his kids and sort of yeah relived sort of a or created a Disney childhood for his kids, and he probably had seen some of those before, maybe some were new, but he got really into it. He would
Hmm.
even tell us he got really charmed by these films, seeing them with his kids, and then he just grew into that role of really not guiding us, but being a big part of
Being a champion
the
for you
songs
guys.
and being a champion. It started out being just Roy by himself. Then Jeffrey became a big champion. And the one thing he had to learn, I remember he just couldn't read storyboards. We would show him a sequence with pictures. He was just used to scripts. So somebody literally had to write down and in text and write down what was in the story was then he could relate to it. Now it took a half a year or maybe 9 months or something like that, and he learned to read storyboards, and then he was totally into it, of course, after that. But so he had to learn how we do those films, and he had to learn and find out why they take so long, you know. But if you do it well, there's a chance that some of these things might become classics. And yeah, starting with The Little Mermaid, as you mentioned earlier on, that really was the first one. We had a little bit of backwind from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I worked on, and that's animation, live action combination film. But that was a huge box office hit,
Hmm.
and even there, some people thought. I remember some audiences saying we didn't even know that this kind of animation was still possible. You know, that old world fluid type of animation that you're used to from Tom and Jerry, or you know those old shorts. So people kind of perked up. So we followed that up with a good story with the Little Mermaid. We tried our best. We had great writers, of course, great composers with Alan Menken and the lyricist Howard Ashman, who was also very much involved in the story structure of The Little Mermaid from day one. And we just had all of a sudden really good people coming in to the
Hmm.
point where I remember hearing songs like Part of Your World or Under the Sea just being played. You just hear these themes in the hallway from your office and going like, this is really good music. I mean, we have to really, as animators, we have to step up. We have to step up to come to that level of quality. You know, we really it was really inspiring. You know, and so yeah, luckily that turned out. I did King Triton, Ariel's father on that one, and we were off and running.
So I know I told you that I was going to mention the Sandro Cluzo story once we started talking. Now, you and Sandro Cluzo, I see you guys talk on things, and Sandro, when he came on my show, I've never smiled more talking to somebody on this show than Sandro because he just oozes enthusiasm about what he does. You know, you hear that term or you hear that phrase, it's like, I don't have to do this, I get to do this. And it feels like everything that Sandro does and he talked about as far as his career goes, that he had an absolute blast, like he loved every second of it. And you are the other side to that coin as well. Every interview I ever see you on where you talk and you get like really nerdy in the best possible way about animation, it brings such a smile to my face seeing somebody that not like me in a sense of like we have the same skill, but it's just like the same love for the same thing. You know, it's just like you come at it from a professional side because you're in that industry. I come at this strictly as a fan, but like when you guys are having a good time, it translates onto the screen. When it translates onto the screen, us as fans get it and we enjoy it. So don't ever lose that spark. Like I love hearing you talk about animation. So please, I want you to start. I know you're busy as shit. I want you to start a podcast, Andreas. I need thousands of hours of stories of you. Now, I'm going to share this other part of the story before we get back to the Little Mermaid. So, back a couple years ago when Disney did the sketchbook series, when they had five artists on there, I had just watched a whole bunch of interviews with you. I think I was just getting ready to start the podcast, or I might have already started it. And I used to draw way back in the day. I gave it up a long time. I had a really bad art teacher. They all they wanted to push was classical art. They didn't want to push animation. They didn't want to do comic books like the stuff I was into. And so I kind of just gave it up. But I remember not drawing for a very long time. And my oldest kid, he's 16, he loves drawing. So every once in a while, I'll break out a pen and paper and I'll draw with him and stuff like that. And Sketchbook comes out, and I'm watching the Eric Goldberg episode. Same thing with you and Sandro, the enthusiasm oozes off the screen. I went and paused it and went to a hobby store to get a book, some paper and pencils. And I started, it looked horrible. Don't get me wrong. It was god awful, Andreas. But just seeing you guys get so happy about drawing the characters that you got to draw for these movies, it means something to us fans. So, like I said, it's a long-winded way of saying, please don't lose that enthusiasm. Please don't lose that sparkle that we see on the screen, man. So, thank you essentially for what you guys do. Now, getting it back to Little Mermaid, is there a moment in this movie that you were more proud of? It doesn't have to be like something you worked on. Maybe it's just like the collective movie in itself. Or if it's something you are proud of that you got to work on. But is there like one moment throughout this movie that you're like, damn, we crushed it, or I crushed it on that part?
There were a couple of moments that I can think of. I thought this is going to be something else. This is really going to work. Uh, I mean, we before we start animating, we create a story reel
Mhm.
or animatic with just story sketches. Nothing is moving yet, but you already have the songs in it, like scratch tracks, like we call them, not even fully orchestrated. We have some maybe final dialogue, some scratch that some other people uh, read, and so it's a very kind of a messy thing to look at. But that's how Walt did Snow White and Pinocchio and all the other ones. You do a story reel, you do the whole thing, you storyboard it, and you time it out already with those sketches, temporary music and all that. And so the first screening, when you have the movie together, your story together for the first time, is usually rough
Mhm.
and not working all that well because it's the first time you put all this stuff together. You have the crew in and you watch, and there are so many things that maybe went wrong and need work, or boring bits, or a song needs to be taken out, or there's usually after a first time screening all kinds of ideas on how to make it better. And on The Little Mermaid, we had that screening and we looked at each other and we were all thinking, let's not change this. This is really good. I mean, you are so into the character, you're so into the mood from a musical point of view. The only thing I remember that they messed with a little bit was the ending, how to get rid of Ursula, and that
Mhm.
came a little bit later. And I don't even remember how she was taken care of at the beginning, but that was it. Everything else kind of stayed the same. And I remember the longest feature animation employee at Disney was Bernie Mattinson. He just passed away, I think, last year, or the year before. He had been with Disney for many, many decades, longer than anybody. So I think he started in the early 50s. So he saw quite a few of these first time screenings, classic films, Lady and the Tramp first time, Peter Pan the first time, and he would say things
Wow.
like, yeah, it's usually rough the first time around, but he said The Little Mermaid was the only one that he has ever seen where things were really working from day one, and you just needed to refine. So stars were just aligned, the right talents were put together, and we didn't really have to mess with it that much in terms of story. We did later with other films that would come later, but Little Mermaid was just destined to work from the start.
Ah, man, like I said, I just watched this one today because I knew we were going to talk today. But I watched it with my daughter, my little girl, my 2 year old, and she was in her little Ariel dress. So she's head over shoulder, like head over is it head over shoulders, whatever that term
Head
is.
over heels is
Head over heels. That's a better one. Look at you, you're a professional, Andreas. I'm just over here blabbering. But she loves all the princesses. I mean, she's been on a big Moana kick. She loves the songs. The songs are what gets her, and then she
yeah.
gets to dress up like the characters. You know what I mean? So This thing has crossed so many lines of generations within my family. It's transcended age, transcends sex, it transcends all of that stuff, and it's just a beautiful story, man. So I love this one. Now, another one that you worked on, I think has got one of the most unique villains, and he is also a big cat. We're talking Scar. There's something about Disney and green for evil, right? You see it so often. That's why the lights are green today. I usually ask my guests what their favorite color is, but I wanted to do green just because of Scar in particular, man. I remember seeing this movie when I'm a little kid. And like I said, we had these VHS, we had the Disney VHSs. Anytime it came out, my mom would try to get us one of them. And we would just constantly watch them in rotation. And Scar's Be Prepared song is one of the most beautiful, haunting, scary, especially as a kid. It's very like, I can't think of the term I'm looking for, but it's scary. And at the end of the day, it's very scary for a little kid, man. So I got to know, what was it like going? I think we might have skipped Aladdin. Did Aladdin come out before Lion King?
It did, yeah. It's
Okay,
okay.
cool. We'll get
We can go
we'll
back to
get
that.
okay, go. We'll get back to Aladdin because Jafar is a fantastic character. But Scar, the whole be prepared thing, man. I loved what you did. So how does the thing for Scar come about?
Well, I had done two villains prior to Lion King. I'd done Gaston
Hmm.
and Jafar. So coming onto Lion King, I thought, well, it's going to be somebody else's turn, obviously, because all animators want to do villains. Because it's just a simple thing. You can do so much more with a villain than you can do with a hero. It's just the way it is. They're eccentric. They want to change the world. Evil and menace is just more fun to portray than niceness.
Hmm.
It's just the way it is. So
Deliciously evil.
yeah, and uh, and I thought, well, maybe maybe I can do Simba or Rafiki, or started to look at other characters on the storyboards to see what I might like, which character I might like to do. And then somebody said at the studio, you know what, Andreas, Jeremy Irons, the British actor, had just been in
Yeah.
to record some lines for Scar, to try out for Scar. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I want to listen to those lines." So I got a hold of those tapes, and it was instant. It was a connection. Like I just closed my eyes and I saw things. With that voice, that man can read anything, and you want to
Hmm.
animate it. You can read your dinner menu in a restaurant, and I will want to animate that because he has a way with words and making it sound not just important but also smart and unusual and. So I absolutely loved the dialogue that he recorded early, and then I said, maybe I can ask. It's not my turn to do another villain, but I can ask. So I asked the directors and basically told them that I think after listening to those tapes, I think I can do something with that character. And they were in the middle of something, I remember, and they at their desk, and they just looked both at me and said, "Well, yeah, we kind of had you in mind." After all, and then, well, thank you very much. It was easier than I thought. And this was a big privilege because, again, somebody else should have done it, in all fairness. Uh, but such a when your actor, like Jeremy Irons, is so good, there was never really a moment when I did a dialogue scene or even the pantomime scene where I thought, now what am I going to do here? I could do A, B, C. I can do this. I could play it that way. It was always so clear because scene after scene, before I got started, you do close your eye and you listen and I would just see it. I would just see, when he just to give you one silly example, when he sets, I did that whole sequence where Scar is setting up Simba on the rock before the
Hmm.
stampede. He said, "Now you stay here. Your father has a marvelous surprise for you. What is it? What is it? What if I told you? It wouldn't be a surprise now." So I did that whole section, and at one point during that, they talk about the hyena, and that Scar knows about what happened with the hyenas, and Simba says, "Oh, you know about the hyenas? I mean, you know about that?" And Simba and Jeremy Irons had this insight. He did the baby talk. He puckered his lips. He says, "Simba, everybody knows about that." And that stuff is just gold. It's like, oh man. So of course I used it, and he's just looking at him, and of course everybody he lifts up his head. Everybody knows about that. You stupid little kid. Um, patronizing and all. And those are just gifts that the actors give you, to play with. And he was probably the most interesting voice I ever worked with. It just doesn't get better than that. So yeah, I'm just so grateful that I had a chance to do that character. And the Be Prepared sequence that you referenced, I remember seeing that in the storyboard stages, just out in the hallway. They hadn't even had a presentation yet, or hadn't put it to film yet, and I'm going like, my God, this is like Nazi Germany. Look at these marching hyenas, and I knew a little bit about Hitler's filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl. She was
Hmm.
this woman who did all his propaganda films, and they definitely borrowed from the big shadows, and the columns. And
Hmm.
I said, I don't think should we do this? And I mean, me being a little sensitive toward that stuff, being from Germany, being raised in Germany after the war, long after the war, and I was like, I don't think they can do this. So I was waiting for it to be kind of shelved, and then I did see the story reel with Jeremy singing in it, and I'm going like, man, this is kind of appropriate because he's an evil son of a gun, and so this is referencing that, and I thought it was extremely clever, and we just jumped at it, and committed to it. So yeah, that was just an amazing sequence.
Oh man, it's the best sequence in the entire movie, dude. It's just like I love everything about that sequence. I mean, it's got heart, even though the heart's in the wrong place. It's you see the hatred, you just the blind loyalty to Scar. I mean, you see everything. Like, it's something so special that you guys do. Like, it starts in your head, and then it comes down your arm, and then you put it on a paper, and then you guys have the hardest job, and you either make us love a character, you make us hate a character. And Scar, I mean, I used this term earlier. He is delicious. All the villains that you've done are deliciously evil. They're so fun to root for sometimes, but they're also just as fun to root against because the good guy's going to win. I mean, the good
Yeah.
guy's always going to win. But there was something different about Scar, and there was also something different about Jafar that we'll get to in just a second. That, like I said, that Be Prepared scene, there's moments in these movies where I close my eyes and somebody will go, Lion King. That's the first scene I think of is the Be Prepared scene. When it's 101 Dalmatians, like those two scenes in particular, the Lion King with the Be Prepared, where he's at the top and he's looking down as they're coming in, the green flames are going. I put that on the same level as in 101 Dalmatians when they're in the mansion, the Cruella de Vil mansion, and then the Horace and Jasper are about to hit him. Sergeant Tibbs has his arms against all the puppies, and everything goes red.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without words, what the intent is. There's evil. There's malice behind it. And it was the same thing. Like you could literally, I don't want to mute it because the song is just so good. The voice acting is just so phenomenal. It matches with the animation with Lion King. But both of those scenes you could mute out and you know everything that you need to know about that character right there. You know everything about that scene without hearing a single word, a single piece of music. It was pure poetry in motion. I mean, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Now, with that being said, something I want to circle back to when you were talking about you hear Jeremy and then you just close your eyes and then you see everything that's going on. When you see stuff, you in particular, are you seeing stuff rough? Are you seeing stuff like we see on the screen when it's all said and done? When you're seeing how to work out a scene or how to work a character out, what are you seeing? I know that's probably hard to describe, but what are you
Yeah,
seeing?
I see. I no, I do see the acting visually.
Hmm.
I listen to it just vocally because that's what I have at this point. And then my challenge is what would that look like with those
Hmm.
words being said that way? Uh, I remember it's the same sequence that I mentioned earlier with Scar saying Simba up on the rock before the stampede, but. Um, there's something I forget now the context where during the conversation um, they were talking about Mufasa and Scar says, well, it's sort of a father-son thing,
Thing.
and this is how a human acts this out, father-son. You flick your hand up like this. I
Super
said,
dismissive.
I was thinking, can I do that with a paw? I mean, it's a lion, there's certain things that you cannot do, because you don't have the hands. But then again, thinking about Jungle Book, Shere Khan and Bagheera, they would use their hands in
Hmm.
close-up scenes, especially. You cannot do those human type acting that human type acting, when the pop sort of becomes a hand for a second or two, you cannot do that in a long shot because it looks very strange. You
Hmm.
do these things on medium close-ups, and so I did it. I have him sort of, yeah, father son, then that pause, that expression of disgust, and then the hand just goes thing, and then he puts his paw down again. But you just need that to articulate a human thought,
Hmm.
and I remember, yeah, thinking about that, how I would do that, because you have to portray it. It's a half hand, half paw, basically, and it's just a fun challenge to do. I mean, you have a when you remember Jungle Book when Shere Khan sings to the vultures, he puts his paw like a hand on his shoulders.
Hmm.
That's what friends are for,
Hmm.
like an opera singer. And so he did that, and I know that I could go there too. Just have to be careful how you draw that so it doesn't look like a human hand all of a sudden. But these are to me, these were fascinating challenges, to how far can you go? Same thing, yeah. When at the end of the movie, when Simba is cornering Scar and the hyenas, and Scar, of course, had taken over, and Simba says, "Scar, step down," and Scar goes, that's just one little problem. And he puts up his paw like
Hmm.
this. He says, "You see them? They think I'm king." Again, very human stuff, very
Hmm.
human gestures. So you just have to be careful how you transform those hands into those paws into hands temporarily. But I love those challenges, like I said.
Yeah, like when you were describing it and you were seeing it, do you remember Ratatouille where he is like Remy takes the strawberry and the piece of cheese and he's trying to get his brother Emile to close his eyes, try them both, and then you see the colors kind of swirl. When you were
Mhm.
explaining it, I was like, I wonder if that's what it was like because that felt like a very I'm trying to work a scene out in Ratatouille, those swirls coming together to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
something, you know what I mean? So it's
Mhm.
always interesting to
Excellent.
see and hear you guys' process. Now, a character that I am so fond of because he reminds me of a character from Peter Pan. We're talking Jafar. Captain Hook is one of my favorite villains. It's tied up there probably with Shere Khan just because Jungle Book is. Well, no, that's a lie because it's like a three-way tie between Cruella de Vil. Mark Davis, he's my favorite of the nine old men. I mean, his design work was beautiful with Cruella de Vil. There was just something so sinister about that character, man. But Captain Hook, he's probably they're all tied for number one, but he reminded me so much, and vice versa with Jafar. It was just his very flamboyant, his like just how he moved, how he talked. He was very elegant, right? Just like Captain Hook, even though Captain Hook was a little unhinged. But how does Jafar come about, man? So obviously you go from Little Mermaid, we're coming into Aladdin now. We already talked Lion King. I got that one out of line here. But how does Jafar come to be?
Well, we're leaving one movie out. Beauty and the Beast came
Beauty, yep,
after
yep, yep.
Little
Gaston,
Mermaid.
yeah.
So I had done Gaston, and just to wrap that up very quickly, that was probably the most difficult character I ever animated because he had to be handsome because the Beast is ugly. The Gaston had to be handsome, and that's very difficult to out of a handsome guy to get to be expressive and show villainy. So I had to walk that fine line. How cartoony and eccentric can I be before it falls apart? Because he also has to be real. So it was like again, you just have to be careful with him, how you draw him and how you move that character. So by the time we started Aladdin and I got Jafar, I said, well, here's a villain who actually looks like a villain,
Yeah.
I don't have to be so careful with all that realism. So I said, I'm going to go and make his face like a mask, just
Hmm.
really have some fun with it and use a great deal of caricature. So I normally would set his mouth, if this was be Jafar's nose, you set the mouth here, but I said, no, 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 I'm going to put it down here where I can have weird mouth shapes forming, and because he's got these white shoulder pieces on his costume where the parrot is sitting on, he could like his mouth could do blah 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 blah, talk to him like here, then the parrot walks over there, and then his mouth. I mean, I just knew that there was the potential of just doing something new in dialogue, like a new configuration of lips and things, and so I was able to invent something that I really hadn't done before. I hadn't seen in other Disney films. And so from that point of view, yeah, Jafar was also like a high in my career. And I'm like, again, super, super grateful. He was very easy to walk. If it's just a walk, because usually the walk of a character, all animators knows this. It's a character walk. A character will walk based on the personality, whether it's Captain Hook or Cruella, with her fur coat, which is part of her
Hmm.
personality, that will have a certain kind of movement behind her. But Jafar was so easy to have him enter or leave a scene because I always thought because he's so smooth and oily, he's on roller skates. He just comes in and he says something and then he throws his cape and off he goes. That's his exit. So not a lot of analysis with up and down and what is the head going to do, how bouncy it's going to be, none of that. So once I decided that I'm going to play him on roller skates, it was easy and fun.
Is that like the first for you? I know everybody's different as far as artists go. Is that like the first thing you kind of like try to work out, like how they move in the space they're in?
It very often is. We often are being asked before we start a production scene, do a walk cycle on your
Hmm.
character. That shows the personality, how bouncy is he, or is he stern or leaning over or backward. Show us the personality within the walk. I remember I was for some time on The Emperor's New Groove, and at that time I was heading up Isma, the early version of that film anyway. And I did a walk with her hips leading almost the body was late, but her hips were like in front. These are the kind of things you do sometimes to get ready for your actual scenes for the movie. But yeah, from a walking point of view, Jafar was just so easy.
Yeah. Now, w- I know this is probably I told you I wouldn't hit you on a question that's going to make you think like so far back, but I really like I'm hoping you might be able to remember this one since Jafar like kind of sticks in as one of your proudest moments. Was there anything that you were watching at the time that might have inspired you? Maybe you were consuming, whether it was music, a film, a piece of art that kind of helped you flush out how he moved, how he acted, how he looked.
His voice, of course, got me started. Jonathan Freeman gave that oily performance, somebody who lies, who caters to the Sultan because he has an agenda, of course. And so there was a quality in that required these theatrical slow movements, and um, calculated movements. And I
Hmm.
just got that all out of the voice. I remember. And what was interesting in terms of designing him was we were out to do something stylized, almost like Sleeping Beauty, where we say, okay, we're not going to do the Beauty and the Beast Disney house style. We're going to stylize something here and make it graphically more interesting. And Eric Goldberg, of course, started on his genie, did some test animation with Robin Williams, and we were all blown away by what
Hmm.
he did. And again, all of us thinking, can you do that? I don't think so. But you got to do something with your character that comes up to that level. So again, it was a challenge, and but a good one. And us doing our designs, Mark Hen with Jasmine and Glenn with Aladdin and me with Jafar, we would definitely want to make sure that our stylized versions belong in the same movie. So more than maybe on other films, we early on we would put our designs on the same wall and compare. And then somebody would say, well, that's still too complicated. We have to simplify this, or that doesn't quite work. We wanted to have the same language visually in terms of lines and shapes. And that was a very conscious decision early on too. Because in looking back on Beauty and the Beast, uh, without wanting to badmouth that film, because it's a great film, but when you look at Gaston and Le Fou, Gaston is pretty cartoony. I
Hmm.
mean, Le Fou is pretty cartoony. Gaston is more real. Do they belong in the same world? It's debatable. Um, but well, by the time we came onto Aladdin, we wanted to make sure all these guys belong in the same universe, and I think it shows.
That it does, man, and it's so fitting what Jafar turns. Spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen Aladdin, shame on you. It's been 30 plus years. Go and watch it. It's like when you were talking about it, the conscious decision. What was it? A conscious decision to make him in a snake at the end of the movie, or was that something that you like flushed out already? Because just how you were explaining how he moved, It was very snake-like, and there's nothing more sinister than a villain that's got a little goatee and he's just messing with the
Hmm.
goatee and twisting it, very snidely. Is it snidely? Yeah, it very like villain-esque, right? But where does the snake portion of Jafar come in? Did you guys already know you were going to turn him into a snake, or was that something you fleshed out with the design?
That's pretty much the story people came up with that.
Yeah.
That's a story crew, really. And when you think about it, if you would turn into an animal to be more threatening, and what better animal than a snake? I mean, it could have been a gorilla, or who knows, could be any animal, alligator. But a snake, like you said, it's very oily and
Hmm.
smooth, and it fit the personality
Yeah.
of, uh, of Jafar. So it was kind of an obvious. And then I remember I designed the snake based on Jafar's features, try to translate some of that onto the snake's face, which was an interesting challenge. Um, yeah, I think that the choice to turn him into a snake was actually really good.
Oh, absolutely. It was top notch. I mean, it's perfect. I don't get one without the other. You know what I mean? It's just like you expect that now seeing it. Now, as we start to wind down, we're going to rotate into some fans' questions here, but I like to ask a couple of these questions before we rotate into the fans. Now, I'm going to throw a couple names out there, and then I want you to just let me know what you think about them. Like, it's a lot of the artists that one you've probably gotten to work with. I know a couple of them you haven't. They passed away before you got to the studio. But one of my favorite artists, and I know it's not a surprise to she's one of almost everybody's favorite artists. If you love color, if you love stylized things, if you love abstraction, if you love modernism art, you love Mary Blair, right? Before I knew who Mary Blair was, I was fascinated with color because of her work, right? She is one of the most influential artists of this century. She'll always and continue to inspire future artists, man. But when you hear the name Mary Blair, is there a thought? Is there an emotion? Is there a scene? Or is there something that comes to mind whenever you hear that name for the first time?
Well, I just enjoyed. I just remember having conversation with Mark and Alice Davis about Mary Blair because they were best friends.
Hmm.
Even after she left the studio, I think Small World might have been the last thing she did for Disney. There might have been a few other small things, but they stayed in touch until she died. And so they had plenty of Mary Blair stories. And Mark told me that Walt just loved her color
Hmm.
because they were so attractive, and in Mark's point of view she put colors together that would seem odd that
Hmm.
nobody else would. And I think it's a whole quote that Mary that puts color together that invents colors that I didn't even know existed, or something like
Yeah.
Walt said something like that. And so yeah, it's just mad. It's just absolutely magical. I mean, you see her stuff come up for auction once in a while, and recently Heritage had a whole bunch of Mary Blairs, and there was one I was almost bidding on. It was from Alice in Wonderland, and she was amongst the flower characters,
Yes.
and she was just leaning behind I think it was either a rose or a red tulip. So everything was kind of green, blue, and then the type of red, because there was a little pink in it. It was a specific red. It was like I just went, oh man, you just nailed it. If it would have
Yeah.
been a different red, it wouldn't have worked. So just an absolute expert in terms of color and composition. And yeah, Mark Davis compared it to Matisse. She says she knew color better than Matisse. So
Yeah.
nothing but high praise.
Absolutely, man. Like I said, I can never get enough stories on her. If you guys are a podcast listener, I think it's called the Disney History Institute. They've got 16 parts, and I think I talked to Todd, the guy that does it. He's got like another 8 parts, and they're all on Mary Blair. They
Wow.
start from when she was born to, I think right now they're just talking about her finishing up with Song of the South and her doing her freelancing work after, after she had her second kid, Kevin. Fantastic. Can't praise it enough. Now another name, just because I think you said you got to hear a couple stories from Mark and Alice. Mark, obviously being my favorite from the Nine Old Men. When you hear Mark, the name Mark Davis, what's the first thing that comes to mind? That's not a martini.
I just hear his chuckle. He had
Yeah.
this sort of he was when he thought something was funny, he wouldn't burst out in laughter. You would get a chuckle out of him, like a something like that. That is so typical of him. I just hear that, and when Pete Docter and Chris Merritt put out that book on Mark's work at Imagineering, the
Hmm.
two-part box set, that it has just about everything he ever did in terms of rides and attractions, sketches and photos, and it's actually called Mark Davis in his own words. And so they have nothing but Mark's quotes in there. For me, those are a joy to read page after
Hmm.
page because I hear his voice and I hear that little chuckle, So that's a privilege to those who have known Mark, because uh, that's what you hear when you read his quotes. So I felt so privileged to become friends with both of them. But Mark and Alice, when they love meeting young people, young artists, probably partially because they didn't have any kids of their own, but they loved young people. And when they saw that were passionate about something and like honestly interested in finding out about the art form or a certain artist, they will give you all the time in the world to feed you that, to tell you stories, and help you with your passion and questions. It was an absolute joy. I mean, just to end this up on a Mary Blair note, one of my greatest car rides when I was driving and I was stuck in traffic. The best one ever was with Alice sitting next to me. There was an event at Disneyland, and we were both invited. It had to do with Mark's. I think it was an anniversary of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and they did something at Disneyland. So I was invited. Alice, I said, Alice, I'm going to pick you up, so we can both chat in the car. She said, yeah, pick me up. So I did, and of course we got stuck, and traffic was horrible. It took forever to get down to Disneyland, but to be stuck in traffic with Alice Davis and hear all these stories, and she told me basically about Mary Blair's life story, about how her personal life was not that easy, her ups and downs, her family, and how she had to mess with um, being a woman, at that time, being so influential. So it was absolutely wonderful to us, and I was almost hoping that traffic wouldn't move, that we had more time just to sit here and talk. It was absolutely wonderful.
So what I took from that, Andreas, is as soon as the Milk Call book's done, as soon as your film's done, the next book is a Mary Blair book from Andreas. Is that what? And I would loved it. I would love it.
You know what? I that has to do with color and visual development art. There are other people who do that who would have even a greater insight. John Kaymaker pretty
Hmm.
much is very much in tune with Mary's work. Actually, there's an exhibition going on right now, a second
Yeah.
exhibition, because they had one years ago on Mary Blair, and I think John curated that one. So, yeah, I think John would be ahead of me. But I did go as far as thinking, okay, here's this Milt Kahl book. If it would be a series of other animators, the Nine Old Men, Freddie Moore, could be others, what would a Frank Thomas cover look like? So I did design that. And I'm going to propose that to Disney later. So I do have the Frank Thomas cover already.
Oh, that'd be so cool. And speaking of the Mary Blair exhibit, I'm hoping I'm out in Orlando, so I'm hoping they bring it to the East Coast. We'll be on the West Coast. We're gonna do a little LA trip to go see some friends and some family next June, and we're gonna go out to Disneyland. And I'm hoping they'll do one of the exhibits or a couple of the exhibits at the Family Museum. But Disney, please do this out in Disney World, please. I want to see the Mary Blair exhibit so bad. But nonetheless, before we move off of Mary for just one second, do you remember what story she might have told you in the traffic? Alice, by the way, might have told you that just stuck into you. Is there one
Well,
story about it?
some of the hardships, that she actually moved away from California to New York to be
Hmm.
close to her son, who had some challenges mentally,
Hmm.
and needed treatments, and in those days maybe didn't get the proper treatments. So she was a mother, that was of course a big part of her life, maybe even more important than an artist to her. So the way she, and then later on, um, yeah, I mean, the whole idea that she had to face up this big crew of men, who also wanted her job, basically wanted to be in Walt's favor, but Walt picked her, for that, and so yeah, there were just many things that came out. Some I don't really want to talk about because it gets a little
Oh
dark.
yeah,
It
you're fine. You're
gets a
fine.
little dark in a private life. But yeah, what a privilege to hear those stories.
Oh, absolutely. What it would have been like to be a fly on the wall, just to be able to experience just anything Mary put her pen to, anything she put her paintbrush to. Like I said, a true one of one, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't know who I'm talking about, shame on you. Google Mary Blair. Um, the last person we'll bring up before we rotate to the couple fans questions we have, man. When you hear the name Glenn Keane, what's the first thing you think of?
Well, he was the first power animator. You know, his stuff is so raw
Hmm.
and vital. And I remember I was around when he was just finishing up the bear fight in The Fox and the Hound, and I don't think the movie would be what it is without the bear fight. I think he almost
Hmm.
saved the movie. There was definitely drama needed. It's a very light film, and having that in there really adds conflict and drama and contrast. And so yeah, I mean, Glenn was a huge influence and great friend, and just love his work.
That movie was the first Disney movie that made me cry. By the way, it's a very like it's one of those ones that I can't watch often, like I can watch some of the other ones because it does exactly what it evokes a feeling of sadness of loss with friends. I mean, we can all
Mhm.
relate to not being able to play with some kid because maybe the parents didn't like each other,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was just one of those things that even as a little kid, that's why I think these movies are just like I said, they transcend age, man. Even as a little kid watching that, I knew that that was like a very personal story to everybody. So hats off to you guys, man. Now with these fan questions, we had some really really good ones. This is probably my favorite question of the entire one. So we did a lot of villain talk, and one of my favorite movies of all time. This was actually the last. My mom is still alive, but this was the last movie my mom took us to go see in the movie theaters, Lilo and Stitch. So I love Lilo and Stitch because it's such a beautiful movie. But Jackie wrote in, and like I said, this is my favorite question. What's it like going from animating villains to an innocent little girl like Lilo?
The simple answer would be, and I want to elaborate a little bit on that, but the simple answer is you just shift gears. You say,
Hmm.
okay, enough of that, enough of these bad guys. Now it's time for something else. Boom, there you
Yeah.
go, forward. You completely shift and you completely need to dissolve into that character, which is so different. And that's why I wanted to do her because, Stitch is part villain, part good guy. So people would maybe think that I would gravitate toward that character. No, it had always been Lilo from day
Hmm.
one, because it is so different. As an animator, you want to hop. I think you want to hop around and do different, or prove to yourself that you are able to do different character concepts. So she was. I mean, if Scar was the most interesting voice that I ever worked with, Lilo was probably the character that I was able to crawl into and feel her feelings, her emotions from the inside out.
Hmm.
Um, I just remember one thing that happened on Lilo that had never happened to me since and or before. I was in the middle of animating the character, and I was doing the hammock scene where Nani and Lilo at night are in the hammock, and Nani's trying to tell Lilo that she doesn't have good news. It looks like the social worker is going to pick her up the
Hmm.
next morning, and she wants to tell her that, but she just can't. And Lilo realized there's something is funny with my big sister here, and she kind of wobbles in the hammock toward Nani, and they hug and they let a flower go that they're
Hmm.
both holding. It's just such an emotionally charged scene, and you feel the emotion. I mean, literally from the inside out. So at that time, there was a friend of mine, not an animator, but somebody who was sort of associated with animation in terms of management. He came from LA to visit, and we had dinner. And he asked me what I was working on. I said, "Well, today I just finished that scene in the hammock, and I was describing to him the little character, and that she was a little bit baffled at her sister's behavior, knowing that something's not right, and then they hug, and I started to tear up
Yeah.
over dinner, and I'm going like, whoa, this is new. This has never happened to me before. I don't talk about my character and get emotional like that because it's still just drawings, but it's just, I mean, looking back on it, it's just, I was feeling it, and man, I was feeling it. I was in there, and I was just doing this character in a totally different way, not with a lot of gestures, not no outbursts. It was the subtleties on that character were all that really mattered because with subtleties, you really portray what's going on in her head, and there were a lot of things going on. So yeah, I always remember that I teared up when I was telling this friend of mine what I was doing. It was really unusual.
Well, I will say that that scene in particular is one of the scenes that I think about when I think about Lilo and Stitch. And I think about it now more so just being a dad. And there is something that's unspoken that a kid knows when their parent or somebody that they love is really going through the ringer. And
Yeah,
the only and I'm trying not to do this and cry, man, but it's like when you reach out and you need a connection. Right.
yeah,
And that's what Lilo notices. Lilo notices that Nani is struggling with something. And
exactly.
then without thinking, without words, without doing anything, the only thing you can do is react and embrace and hug and try
And
to share that pain.
yeah, just be close and offer
Hmm.
comfort. Whatever is
Yeah.
going through on his head, it was that simple and really effective. And yeah, I cry when I see that sequence now. It's crazy.
Now, I will say, when I think of Lilo and Stitch, I think of that scene. And then the other one that I think of, it's hands down because you did something so special with Lilo. I mean, you watch Lilo and you're like, this is a kid on the screen. Like it's an animated kid, but it's like just how like just watching my two littles interact with each other. And there it's like 4 and 2. So it's primate. It's nothing but war between them. And then they're sweet. And then they go back to war. And then they're sweet again. But there's that moment when you see Cobra come in for the first time, and then Lilo is doing voodoo. So she's got her sporks and her spoons, and she's got it in the pickle jar. And then that just slight little head nod and saying my friends are bad. I've seen my kids do that before they watch Lilo and like, what are you doing? Nothing, so it was just
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
little nod where you were talking about Scar and Shere Khan doing that gesture, right? Where you couldn't make it too human, but you have a human character now, so you can be a little bit more human. It was just
yeah,
so raw and it was so real and it was just so damn funny too, that scene in particular, man. So
yeah.
fantastic. And thank you for answering that. Lilo and Stitch, man. It's just one of those movies that is just perfect. Oh, we got a couple more here and then we'll wrap it up. Pineapple Bank wants to know, what was it like working with the French animation team on Mickey's Runaway Brain?
It was a blast. I was sent over there to help supervise the animation process and maybe teach them a thing or two. And of course, the director, Chris Bailey, went over. Ian Gooding was the art director. So a small team went over. It was just a short film anyway, before they started working on parts of our features, Hercules and Hunchback and so forth. But they had done the Goofy movie. So they had experience, and the Goofy movie had turned out really well.
Hmm.
So I just realized as soon as I got there, I don't have to teach these guys a lot. They knew
Hmm.
their stuff. They had done their homework, and so them animating Mickey, we didn't have to start from scratch at all. They were great, and got it. It felt a little strange to be in Paris. There's your Eiffel Tower and there's the Seine and all the cultural offerings that Paris has to do. But it was a 9 to 5 job. You have to go in, and work on an American short film featuring Mickey Mouse. So you kind of it was sort of messed up in your head. But the wonderful thing that came out of that, I made a lot of quite a few good friends, French friends that I'm still close with now after all
Yeah.
those years. So it was just a fantastic time.
Beautiful. Now this one was broken up into three, and so we'll get these ones in here. This one is a lot of fun, and I think you might have talked about this in a previous interview a couple times, man. But I'd be remiss not to ask. If you could have one project that in the past that you weren't alive for, or you might not have been around in the industry just yet, is there one movie in particular that you would have loved to work on? And if so, is there a scene in particular that you would have loved to lend your pencil to?
Hmm. Well, I to generalize it just a little bit, when I started at Disney, I was it was a mixed bag of feelings. It was like this is in 1980, August of 1980. It's like the good news is you have a job at Disney, amazing. The bad
Hmm.
news is the guys are not around. I mean, Eric Larson was teaching, Frank and Ollie were doing their Illusion of Life book. So that was the bad news. So had really hoped. At that time, I thought I was too late. I
Hmm.
didn't have a chance to be part of Lady and the Tramp or Under One Dalmatians or any of them. So, um, uh, but now thinking back, I completely changed my tune on that. I was there at the exact perfect time because in those
Hmm.
early days, in the 50s or the 60s, there were no job openings. The guys were still going strong, and they could handle a feature. Just those few of them. So there were no job openings. There were when I started, and then you get your opportunities to be in the spotlight, and put your own stamp on Disney animation. But in terms of characters, sometimes I look at a section or certain scenes of a particular character and wondering, could I have done that better? I probably could. And then, of course, there are many, many more scenes where you go like, I just couldn't do that. Uh, I just want to say, like the lackey in Sleeping Beauty, there are a few scenes that Milt Kahl did that are flawless, and then there are other ones where you go like, I would have done this a little bit differently. So, and there are the examples maybe throughout the canon of Disney films. So it's just fun to fantasize, what you would have done with that scene, and what would you have done differently? But none of these scenes would be by the top guys because they all knew what they were doing, and their work will always be out there forever.
What would be one scene that if you could, what would be one scene that you would want to work on? It could be the top guys if you wanted to, but if you could just lend a pencil to, even if you don't have full credit on that scene, but you could help out on a scene, which one would you
You
want?
know, you know what? Any scene with Baloo and Mowgli.
Yeah.
Their interaction, it is such a joy. The way that relationship works is so intimate. It's better than Walt and Merlin. And even Ollie Johnson said, we didn't get that tight with Merlin and Ward as we did with Baloo and Mowgli. Just to animate those two characters in just interacting in any kind of way, that would be fantastic.
I would have loved to see you do it on the river when they're floating down, or when
Oh,
he's
yeah,
showing
yeah.
him how to scratch his back on the tree. That would have been my pick for you, if I could have been greedy for a little bit. Uh, what was it like at Disney Animation drawing Warner Brother cartoons on Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Now we did some Roger Rabbit talks, but did that
Yeah.
moment, and I'm going to add a little bit of things to this question, but did that moment feel real? You're at Disney, but you're working on Warner Brothers characters as well, or you're working Disney characters, or you're working next to people putting Warner Brothers characters to Disney characters. Did it feel real?
It's definitely an unusual assignment, and yeah, it felt real. It was, yeah. I mean, I did some scenes with Mickey. Well, I basically did all the front row
Hmm.
characters that came through that tune hall when they
Yeah.
came when they slash hammer to at the Toon Factory, the back wall of the
Hmm.
factory. You see all these characters coming toward the screen. I did all the front row characters. That included Betty Boop and the Roadrunner and Bambi, and Bugs Bunny holding a carrot. And so when I got that assignment, it seemed like an endless characters, doing doing this motion where they come toward the camera and then coming to a stop, looking at the dead villain. And I told management, I said, this is going to take me a while because I don't know how Betty Boop runs. I have to look at old Fleischer cartoons, and then I have to look at you know Roadrunner, and I found out he doesn't hop, run. He beep beep beep. It's that zip
Hmm.
zip zip zip. So you want basically, I wanted to move these characters in character, the way people knew them. So, and Betty Boop, by the way, she runs like this, like a young lady. So you analyze all that, and it did take me a while. And yes, I did get phone calls. Where's that scene? And but I got it done. And then there were little arguments. I remember I did Bugs Bunny saying a line, something about being a rabbit or something. and I used the Bob Clampett model, and Nick Ranieri, who was an animator who also did some scenes in that section. He was a fan of the Chuck Jones
Hmm.
um, version of Bugs Bunny, and I said, Nick, Chuck Jones is in the late 50s, 60s. This is the early 40s, so we have to. So we had some fun arguing our points. Which one
Yeah.
is the best Bugs Bunny? But I did do the Clampett one.
Oh man, I'm a huge Bob Clement fan, and Nick's been on the show before, so I loved
He's
hearing
great.
his
He's
stories as
awesome.
well. Oh, man, he's a fantastic person. Now, this is the last question. This one's coming from me, man. So when you sit back, whenever you decide to hang up, your pencils, you put your pencil in your jar for the last time, man. I'm hoping we get another 40 or 50 years of Andreas working and doing what you're doing, man. Because like I said, you have been one of my bucket list guests since I started this show 5 years ago, and I'm so thankful that I got to do this with you tonight. Now, when you think about everything that you've lent your pencil to, whether it was working on a book with Milt, whether it was working on Jafar, Aladdin, or excuse me, Jafar on Aladdin, Gaston and Beauty and the Beast, Scar and Lion King, Lilo and Stitch, and everything else that you've worked on. If you could encapsulate your time as an artist at Disney, is there one word, one phrase, one sentence that you could think of when you think of your time at Disney?
The American dream come true. I
Yeah.
was living, I was and still am living the American dream. I never thought that when I decided I want to get into animation, I decided that at 10, 11. If you had told me that all this would happen, you're going to go to Disney and you're going to be a major player, the films are going to be successful, you're going to get to know the old animators, have friendships with them, you're going to work for the Walt Disney Family Museum and curate shows that Walt Disney's daughter will ask you. I mean, my life is full of stuff that if I had known, I would have dropped dead as a kid. It is unbelievable
Yeah.
when I look back. And it's actually interesting that you asked that question because I never had time to ask that question. It was not until after I finished my film, Mushka, a year and a half ago, where, okay, you had your career at Disney, you did your first film, and then you pause for a couple of months and you think back, did all this really happen? Because people are still talking about Hercules and want to talk to me about Hercules. And then there's a stage show now in London about the story of Hercules, and people discover Roger Rabbit for the first time or Beauty and the Beast. I mean, it's these things they seem to live on. We would just have been happy to have box office at the time we were making because that allowed us to do another one.
Hmm.
So the longevity of these films is a surprise to me. The old films that they had that they would be classic, of course, because they're so amazing. So, so yeah, the idea that our films live on still absolutely boggles my mind. And yeah, so I started reflecting just about a year ago, wondering, did all this really happen? And it did.
Well, I'm gonna have to pull back what I asked you to do earlier, which is write a Mary Blair book. I need you to write a you book, man. We need to hear. I would love to hear these stories, man, because I hear it from everybody that I have on when I ask that question. It's the same thing. It's like, damn, we did some really cool stuff over the last, and it goes by like that, ladies and gentlemen. It's like you have to enjoy the ride. Everybody says enjoy the ride. You're worried about the start, and then I can't remember who said it, but it was like I don't think of things as like years. I think of things as productions. All right, at this time frame, I was working on this one, and then that one led into this one, which led into this one, which led into this one, and then you look up, and it's been 30 years since you've been at Disney. It's been 40 years since you've been at Disney. Oh shit, I was talking to Mark and Alice Davis not too, a long time ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's just
yeah.
it's one of those things, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the ride. Now, I told you that was the last question, but this is the last one that I'll ask you because it's referring to the book that you're working on. Do you have a date on when it might be released yet? Do you know when?
I think realistically is probably year after next.
Okay.
Since I'm in the early stages, I have it in my head. One thing that will speed it up a little bit, I don't want to have a lot of text
Hmm.
and describe or talk about his life and where he went to school, because John Kingmaker did that already. He
Yeah.
had this very thick, informative book on the Nine Old Men that came out a while ago, where each animator has a big chapter, and he analyzed their whole lives and
Hmm.
and and did that. This is more. it's a bit more personal from my point of view, like my deep dive into Milt's work, but also how I met him, how I wrote to him, how he wrote back to me, how we had that contact, and how I was warned at Disney. Oh, you're going to go up to San Francisco to see Milt Kahl. He has such a bad reputation. He can tear you apart, and nothing would hold me back, And so I
Yeah.
want to write about all of that, make it a little personal,
Personal.
make it a
Yeah.
little personal.
No, and that's what we need, man. It's you see these people on the screen and you think mythological creatures. You see Frank, you see Ollie, you see Mary, you see Glenn. You're like, oh my God, these are the titans of the industry. And then when I started doing this show, like I would get like tongue tied with talking to folks like yourself, and I'd be like, well, shit, he put that black shirt on one hole at a time, just like I put my shirt on one hole at a time. So let's just attack this from a personal level. Let's give people the personal side to their stories, man. And that's what I love about doing this podcast. We know the scars and the Jafars, but we want to know about the Andreas and how he kind of fleshed those ideas out, man. Like I said, this has been an absolute blast. This is a pleasure all on my own, man. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again for having me. It was an absolute blast.
Oh, absolutely, man. I can't wait to do this again. Well, that's been Andreas. This has been Julian. It's been the Cartoon Chronicles podcast, and this has been another piece of your childhood. Good night.